Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Church Talk podcast with Rob and Jason. We are so glad that you are here, that you're listening. I know you're not actually physically here because we're recording this on a random Wednesday, but we are glad that you would tune in and listen. And we are looking forward to an amazing conversation. Rob, you and I actually have gotten to play golf a couple times. We kept saying we were going to make it happen, and
Yeah,
we did. And right now, if I look at our total scores through 2 rounds, we're tied.
we're even. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
beat you by a
crazy.
stroke, you beat me by a stroke.
Yeah.
And you know what? And we both like hit some great golf shots and we both left a lot of stuff on the table. I
Yeah.
hate starting double bogey on like the front nine and then on the back, like
Yeah.
hole one and
Yeah.
hole 10. That was brutal.
Yeah. It was brutal to watch,
Amen.
man. So before we dive into our guest, Rob, anything else we need to talk about, or do we want to just bring our guest in and just get the mush going?
Well, I think our guest might have a comment here because as we were talking right before we hit record, he's the one that really brought this up. And I think sometimes, for people in ministry, I don't know, Jason, how like you kind of feel about this or felt about it. Like I feel, just these tensions all over the place. Here we are, this will drop right at the end of a month that has become synonymous with the Pride Month, right? And for people in ministry, like what do you do with that? Do you just keep your mouth shut and not pour any gas on the fire? Do you say something? Do you? Yeah, it just seems like such a potential trap, and if you come out swinging about it, I don't know that that's a really good look that really, is something maybe Jesus would do. And yet, it's tough, right?
Yes. It's
And so
it's
I
tough too.
love,
Let me
yeah, yeah,
let me say this too. Like it's tough because we talk about pride, and generally when you look at scripture, pride is bad, like that those, and yet I also understand, like if you really want to get behind it, and so there are roots to it that I think I understand where they're coming from. In that it's really about saying, hey, these are people who have been sidelined in our culture. And we want to at least acknowledge that, yes, they're different than us, than what you would call normal. But in the same breath, we want to acknowledge that they're there. And there was a time, I think, when if you were in the LGBTQ community, if you were in a same sex relationship, from a purely civil perspective, right? I'm not talking religious, any of that. I'm just saying, in a governmental way, you were denied some rights that a heterosexual couple, just had. It was ingrained in the law. And so I understand that some of the roots of this grew out of, hey, we need to acknowledge that there are people who are being sidelined both, in culture, but also even in some of their rights. And we want to acknowledge that. Now, what it's become, I'm not always, like I'm not trying to defend
no,
all of it,
yeah.
but I'm also trying to say, hey, you know what? Without being a both sideser, saying I understand where it came from, and how can we find redeeming qualities and speak into it, like you said, as Jesus did.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and I've had, people say, "Well, what would you do, if a gay person came to your church?" And I kind of chuckle. And even though I live in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest and like, very conservative, like my community, my region, you're going to see way more Trump signs than you would see, Biden sign or whoever, and the last number of elections. I do have people who are gay that attend my church, almost every week. And my response is always the same, like just like somebody who struggles with any sin or maybe doesn't struggle, with that sin, if they come in like the rest of us, humbly wanting to learn and grow and worship and be open to what God wants to do in their life, you are welcome and you can be just as much a part of this as anybody else. If you want to sit in the front row and make a spectacle and ask for us to like, put up flags and like, do celebrations, that's, no,
But we
that's
don't
just,
do that for
we don't do
other
that for
groups. That
anything or
Yeah,
anyone. Right. Yes.
Can I
So
yeah,
hop in?
certainly.
Yeah, let's
Doug,
bring in our
come on
guest,
in,
who
baby.
this is not at all the reason we brought you on, Doug.
I know. But here's my like. I don't know if anybody saw this article that came out reporting that Major League Baseball players were writing Bible verses on their pride hats that MLB was making the players wear this month, off and on. And then MLB told them they couldn't do that anymore. And so what it raises for me isn't it's really another group that I really get kind of frustrated with. And that is a lot of my friends who are Gen Xers who've deconstructed faith in reaction to, you know, pain they felt or saw in their fire and brimstone churches or whatever, really being hypocritical, really hypocritical, like calling out the more conservative views to the point that, you know, they want to tout they're inclusive to the ends of the earth, but they're really not. They're only inclusive if you believe their reconstructed kind of worldview. And this is what MLB's thing just reeks of. Like, how could you force players to wear pride hats and then tell them they can't write Bible verses on them? It's just nutty to me. This is where we're at. And so I guess in all this, my beef is more with my friends who are Gen Xers who deconstructed and then reconstructed a very what would be considered progressive or liberal view of the world. And I'm like, man, I say all the time to my one of my friends, I fight for the middle. I think that's where Jesus was. He was never on the right wing or progressive liberal. He's in the middle, and he saw people for people, not as buckets or groups,
Yeah.
and loved on them. And so anyway, I don't know if you
That
got
that's
that
Yeah.
my
where
friend. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's where I feel like we as followers of Jesus, we need to find I feel like this phrase has been used too much, but we need to find a third way, right?
Yeah.
Not a middle ground where everything is okay or it's fuzzy at every end, but we need to really find, hey, what is the way Jesus dealt with and because he didn't become political, but he also was very political within his context in a way, right? And what he did had implications on how people were treated, on how you love people. Like, how do we in America in 21st century really function as followers of Jesus when we have the right to vote, when we have all these rights that for 2000 years Christians haven't had those kind of rights. And so it's some of this is the American experiment is also testing our faith and how we handle our faith in a new setting that is, it's relatively new
Yeah.
to Christendom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guys,
Anyway,
so one of the things that I think about, and I mean, we may have to do 3 podcasts, right? We may have to talk about this for a while, and then we'll introduce Doug and actually talk about what he's up to. But I just remember learning, like, in the rhythm of the Beatitudes, like the first number of the Beatitudes are really things that God does for us that we cannot do. Like, we are crushed, we are in need, and God meets us where we are and he blesses us. And then the next number of the Beatitudes are things that then we're supposed to do in response to the things God has done for us, how we're supposed to live. But then how the last two, are blessed are the peacemakers, right? Well, what does a peacemaker do? It doesn't say, ooh, I take this side or this side. They stand in the middle, which then means you're hated by both sides, right?
Mhm.
And then the
Yep.
last one is blessed are those who are persecuted. Because if you're going to actually truly be a peacemaker, everyone's going to be mad at you. And I find this sometimes where, all my really conservative friends, like, you're like, you're just a liberal. And all my liberal friends are like, you're way too conservative. And it's not that, it's just that I'm right of some and left of the others. And I don't really care about left and right. I care more about trying to keep my eyes on Jesus and do what
Yes.
he said to do,
Yep.
which in some instances makes me seem very extreme politically in both directions. So it's a tough way to live in a world that is like pushing,
Yeah.
extremes these days.
Yeah. The refreshing thing though is I don't find it as much in the younger generations who are
Mm, that's
adults
good.
now.
right.
They are truly inclusive. It really is the Gen Xers responding to their boomer parents,
Yeah.
swinging
Yeah.
the pendulum the whole way back from
Yeah.
the government's going to save the world and we can legislate morality to we're going
Screw
to
the government and screw everything.
Hey,
And
I
we're
know
Yeah.
you
yeah,
can't
we're
show
Gen
me,
Xers. So.
but I got to ask this because I live in Vegas. Rob, as a Canadian, how much does it tick you off that we keep winning the Stanley Cup in the US?
You know what? So I'm a lifelong Edmonton Oilers fan, which the last not this year, but the last 2 years, be getting to the cup finals and losing to Florida, you know, I so
Miami, nonetheless.
I have a deep problem, and I probably need to confess some things and have God do a deep inner work in me about this, but I have a hard time when anyone wins the Stanley Cup when they come from a place that cannot sustain snowfall. Like, I don't even think you should be allowed to have a team if that's the case.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
it bugs
my
me a little bit.
my Golden Knights really messed up the middle of the ice for you guys. You couldn't get
Oh,
rolling this year, man.
oh, well, and you know what? I mean, at the start of this series, Vegas looked unstoppable, and they choked away a couple games they should have won, and that cost them the cup.
Yeah, 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 man. They were tired. I just thought they were tired. Anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
Jason. But thanks for letting me go on a tangent and rip
I I
in the little.
I watched the Stanley Cup Finals too. I kept my eye on it. So
Yeah.
mainly,
Hey, Jason, who's
yeah.
our guest? Tell us.
So
We should tell our listener who's our guest is.
well, we have an amazing guest. His name is Doug Parks, and Doug and his co-founder of Intentional Churches, Bart Rendell, have been friends of mine for a while. Bart, I've actually known since before first grade. He's another one of. We've had a couple of guys now on the podcast that I knew growing up, and whatever. But Bart's been around. But Bart, of course, blew me off because, that's just the way my old friends are. And instead he sent Doug. No, I'm just kidding. I've been talking with both of them. And so Doug is joining us. Doug and Bart are the vision drivers and the orchestrators. I love the way you guys word that, who love helping church teams reach more people for Jesus in their communities. And as executive church leaders, they've been through the drill. They've gone through all this stuff, and they're the kind of guy that when your church is either struggling or maybe wrestling with what's next or how do we keep moving, and these are the guys you call, and they come in and they really walk alongside you. They've got some amazing systems and structures and strategies that they help you understand. And so, Doug Parks, welcome to the Church Talk podcast, and welcome to Intentional Churches. You guys are awesome. I can't wait to hear more. Maybe start, Doug. Just tell us the story of Intentional Churches. How did you
Yeah.
and Bart start this thing?
Yeah, well, I always like to go back to kind of my origin story a little bit because it's kind of been the governing theme of my life. So I grew up in southeastern Ohio, out in like, if you guys ever seen the show Moonshiners on Discovery Channel?
Yeah, yeah,
That's kind of my family. Like, I literally was given whiskey when I had a cold when I was a kid. But, that area of the country back then was pretty depressed, very blue collar. And I grew up in a really not good home and a good situation. And so I had a youth pastor who was very evangelistic in our county, and he befriended me. And late in high school, I came to believe in Jesus as my savior. And man, it has been the adventure of a lifetime. Like, it's miraculous, the difference in my life. Of course, I still got crap in my life, but man. So when you talk about the origin of IC has always been about, always from the very beginning, how do we reach more people for Christ like I was reached by a youth pastor? So then let me fast forward a little bit through my story. So went to a Bible college, first in my family to go to college, had to work, went to work for Chick-fil-A, and through miraculous events and mentoring, got a chance to become the youngest Chick-fil-A owner operator they had ever hired. I was 21 when I took over a mall store. This is pre-cows, so it wasn't as big. And we did really well there, but you can imagine even back then, the leadership development that Chick-fil-A did in business development, because I went to Bible college. I didn't have a single math class. I didn't have a single accounting class. And they developed in us as owner operators, strategic planning and, really the prioritization and all that. So that was really the beginnings of my shaping. If I fast forward, we did awesome, won a ton of awards my last year, but I had not dealt with my childhood and I burned out. And at that time, one of the guys I was friends with in college had come to Vegas to be an intern in a church plant. I was part of a church plant in Cincinnati. And so my wife and I moved out here before kids to be a part of a church plant that was going to reach Gen Xers that was inside of another church plant. So it was like, I know, Rob, you have church planting background. It was a lot of risk stuff. So, and then Bart, my co-founder, was across town on the executive team at was called Central Christian Church here in Vegas. I was at Canyon. I eventually our church plant that was reaching Gen Xers was model chasing. If you know that about Gen Xers, deconstructing and model chasing. He eventually we got up to 500 people. He chased the house church model, and the whole thing imploded. I stayed on to be the executive pastor for Canyon Ridge Christian Church. And then he and I had a dinner, a mutual friend had us to dinner, and we realized I was already doing strategic planning. Central was doing business strategic planning, and we began about 2010 with the intent of could we get a framework where literally thousands of churches could collaborate together, but remain contextualized to whatever they are. And we thought if we could build something like that, we might see millions come to Christ through the believers of those churches. And so we've been through multiple iterations, but that was kind of the genesis of IC. It felt a lot like strategic planning in the beginning, but that was never the point. The point was, could we build a framework and a platform where thousands of congregations could collaborate together to reach millions for Christ?
Wow.
Well,
That's
I've seen you guys. I've watched that evolution from a distance, right, through Bart and our friendship, and just loose connection over the years. And I gotta say, I love where you're at, like what you're doing right now. I do feel like you guys have moved into a sweet spot of the way you're doing things, and I'm excited to see where it goes and what all happens with it. Go ahead, Rob. You were going to say something.
yeah, Doug, I mean, it's cool to kind of hear about where you've been now for, I mean, did you say 2010 is kind of when you guys started
Yes.
doing this kind of stuff? So,
From nothing.
for 16 years.
Yeah.
So, like, give us a little bit of a picture of where Intentional Churches is now, and really, like, what's the dream? I mean, if this could really, we got the big picture, like, hey, we want to see, tons of people accept Jesus, but like, man, what's the dream if this was functioning like, kind of
Yeah.
at full capacity?
Well, I'll just say, guys, and thank you, Jason, for your kind words there. It is the sweetest season of the entire ministry's history right now. And a lot of it is Bart and I have built this thing to always be in collaboration. Like neither one of us wanted to be on stages and write books and we started the very first meeting to begin the planning. We, out of our own family's checking accounts, flew in about
Mm,
6 other friends to say, what will we do if we're going to do something like this? So it's always had this collaborative nature in it. And the reason why it's such a sweet season is because we built it to be basically a giant practical ministry learning community where any church, no matter the size, and I can tell stories of churches of 100 winning right now in incredible ways. One up in Minnesota comes to mind, but the real thrust behind it now we've gotten crystal clear. We help your church make the Great Commission a personal mission statement for every believer, congregant, staff member, and board member across the board. And the big learning, if you will, in the learning community over the last few years was, well, here's what's kind of broken in the American church. The ecclesiology and missiology are broken. Programs and branding and marketing and social media don't win and grow people. The
mm,
whole equation is meant to be mobilizing and activating us as individuals. So kind of this season, we say it must start with you, church leader. Do you have Great Commission fruit in your life?
mm.
Not necessarily conversion, because we're not in control of the outcome, but do you have Great Commission fruit in your life? And so, Rob, when you ask about the future, we've had some generous donors behind us the last couple of years. We've gotten our infrastructure all set for scale, and we're hoping right now we're sitting at about 1,200 churches across 30 plus denominations or networks using what we call our radical alignment system, and we're hoping to get to 5,000 in the next 3 years, man. And we got a pretty robust plan to get there, taking our own medicine about like friend to friend invites, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would definitely. So first of all, any of our listeners that want to reach out to, intentional churches, of course, there'll be a link in the show notes, intentionalchurches.com. If you're like the majority of people who never actually look at the show notes of a podcast, but
Is that like the bulletin at church?
it's exactly like the bulletin at church.
Is that a
But
thing still? Do people have bullets?
my little
We
church, we
call
do,
ours
but
the scoop.
yes, you do.
If you want the scoop, you get a scoop.
Yes. Yeah, I want a scoop of ice cream is what I want.
Yeah, amen.
But I would encourage them to reach out, and connect with you guys because there are multiple ways for a church to connect with intentional churches, and they can do it through very low level beginning point to a high level, almost I don't want to say reorg, but it's a true like strategic planning process that you guys help them do all that, and so yeah, I would just say, man, make the call, like reach out, test the waters, see what's there, see how you resonate with it. And it does seem what you guys are creating is truly a platform. I know your first book, the red one, as you guys call it, intentional churches, like it really uses the metaphor of an engine and getting that stuff together and making it all work. That's what I don't want to say selling because that sounds really bad and I don't mean it that way, but that's what you guys are offering to churches. Hey, we want to help you create an engine that keeps humming. It doesn't matter who the pastor is. It doesn't matter,
That's right.
all this. How did you guys like come around to that kind of thinking? Was it just the strategic brains between you and Bart? Was it something else? Like what does that look like in real life?
I think it was a combination. We, unlike the church leader world, which kind of is set up around a personality and then
Mhm.
content,
Yeah.
as if content can bring enlightenment. What we built was very relational, and we went kind of a ground game. We were going church by church, and you can't help but if you're going church by church to start learning patterns. And the big learnings initially were the ecclesiology and missiology. What I mean by that, what we believe in America to be true about what the church is a dial turn off or two. And this is a great, I know Gen Xers were snarky and we want to criticize everything, but I'm being serious. This is a real learning that institutional thinking is hard to break. It's in our subconscious psyche as church leaders. And what it inadvertently does when you do that, especially if you're a more shepherding type leader, you accidentally are sowing in a DNA in your church people of Christian consumerism. When you're not mobilizing and activating them in the Great Commission, the flip side of that is you're actually sowing in consumerism. It doesn't feel like it, and it on the surface, it feels like I'm doing all the churchy right things and checking the boxes. But if I attend one, give one, serve one, reach one, group one, whatever, and I am not active in personal ownership of the Great Commission in my everyday life, you actually, I would argue, are not living what Jesus taught in the New Testament and exemplified. One of
Mm,
my big challenges to teams right now, to any believer, go read the New Testament through the lens of Jesus showing us how we should implement the Great Commission before he ever gave the words. And the preparation to be a Christ follower is actually in the going. It's not you go to a class or you huddle together with Christians. He prepared his disciples and they screwed up left and right. As soon as they came to faith in him, they were going in every case.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how many of our churches really look like that?
wow,
It's
that's that's
that's
so
Very
hard.
good.
few. Yeah.
It is. So, Doug, I just want to make a connection because, like, I'm coming to this conversation, with Jason saying, "Hey, I know these guys. They're doing really cool stuff. Let's have a conversation with them." So he knows a lot. I know virtually nothing. And so, like, am I correct in my understanding that when your organization, intentional churches, that what that means is helping, churches that you work with, like you said earlier, to have everyone take ownership of the Great Commission. That's the intentionality that you're
Yes.
talking about? Okay.
Yes.
So with that in mind, I'm kind of curious, like what are the things that you typically see that are keeping people in churches from really truly engaging with the Great Commission?
It is primarily, I believe, because we do the same thing to our congregants that church growth conferences do to our platforms or teaching churches do to us. We tell them from the platform they should, or teach them out of scripture, and we do very little equipping, and we never really show them. And we rarely, what we found in, it's not every case, but we found a lot of staffs throughout the country aren't themselves practicing the Great Commission. In our language, don't have ones in their life that they're interacting with every week, and they're all there. Ones are everywhere. Ones from Luke 15 for us, those who aren't yet following Jesus. They're everywhere in our lives, everywhere we go. Every restaurant, every sports team for our kids, they're everywhere. So a part of what I think, if I'm a church leader, listen to this thing, part of what you got to do, it has to start with you. And then that has to weave into your preaching. And then what I see is trying to do is come alongside churches that want to go here and provide resources then that could get the congregation there. The other thing we found to be true is that oftentimes the senior pastor, this is the reason they got in ministry, to see people who don't know Jesus reached by their church people. This is why almost everybody's gotten into ministry. But in a lot of cases, it's a board who's about preserving what has been that gets in the way of the congregation actually being equipped and challenged to do it. I had one elder in a church in the Midwest say to me, "You aren't going to take my church from my mother like that other church down the street did." And I'm like, do you read your Bible? So anyway, I would say these things that we learned, and we did in this radical alignment book that just came out last fall, and we called it the radical alignment, the surprising journey to becoming an intentional church. And the surprise is it must start with you, the leaders. And then you will start to think about your ministry differently if you're producing Great Commission fruit. So, and I give, like, these are really easy, low level pragmatic tips. Like yesterday, I was talking to somebody. How do I get my board here? Well, let's put on every elder agenda. The very first item is we tell our salvation story and who invested in us. The very first one. Then the second one, let's take 10 minutes and write down every one in our lives as board members. And then let's pray for them together before we become the board of directors managing the church. And it will change the culture of that team. You can do that with your staff. These are easy, simple things. Have your meetings, have your elder meeting at a local restaurant. Don't have it at the church. Interact with ones, you guys tracking with me?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where, so I was at a church in South Carolina last week, and the executive pastor there is, I love him, and he is on fire for Jesus in so many ways. And the senior pastor there, who's this young kid, and this is a church of 1,700, right? It's exploded. But they're trying to make that leap that you were describing, because Joseph, the guy that I've been working with, I had a phone call with him just yesterday. He was telling me about this guy who came up to him. This guy's the husband of a woman at the church, and this guy's not a believer or anything, but he came to church with his wife because he's trying to be nice. And he sees Joseph and he goes, "Hey, you look like you might work out occasionally." And Joseph's, he's not huge or anything, but you can tell he's in shape-ish, more than me. And so, but he's like, "Yeah, dude, why don't you join me at the gym someday?" And so they've been going to the gym together for 6 weeks. And Joseph was like, I looked at Joseph and I said, "Dude, that's your one. That's the guy that God has sent into your life. And you don't need to do a Bible study with him. You need to go to the gym with him, and you need to show him what being like Jesus is like in the normal part of life." And he looked at me and he went, "Oh my gosh, I never thought of that."
Mm.
And that's where telling those stories is so important, because this is a staff member, executive pastor. He has every excuse in the book not to have the one, a one in his life, right? All this stuff, but he does. And he is so passionate about it, but he didn't even realize it. And so when we started talking, and I can't wait to connect him to you guys, it was like, you guys are already modeling it. Now you need to come behind it and give yourself some systems and structures to empower your whole church to do it.
And I'll tell you, 201, when churches do this, to give you some idea kind of across the spectrum, as best we can estimate right now in America, I think we've been in a revival for a little while, and will continue to be for a run here. And so the tide has shifted. On average, we're seeing about 3% conversions in a normal church annually. In IC churches, getting back to this basic fundamental biblical model of Great Commission ownership? 13%.
Wow.
13, 4x. And it's not any program or magic. It is just thinking about ministry, about not just using these words how they get overused in church leadership, truly mobilizing and activating the heart, mind, and strength of our entire board, staff, and congregation to be on mission together. And this is what I love, Jason. Main session one, and on our podcast, we just released it again. Dr. Carlos Kelly, Beulah Land Bible Church, Georgia, Warner Robins, Georgia, traditional African American church, and it's amazing what's happened in there. Their church was dying, and in a 3-year run, it's completely. He gave this talk about Luke 5. I'd never seen it this way, and at the end, he goes, "Here's this master carpenter telling master fishermen how to fish." And he tells them not to do what they normally do, but go out to the deep. If you want to be deep, go to the deep, throw your nets over. Well, we've done that before. Throw your nets, and then the nets come up and the nets are breaking. Your church should be chaos. To all the fellow executive pastors, if Great Commission ownership is happening, church should be chaos. And executive pastors, me included, we're always trying to get it controlled and organized. But again, if you read the New Testament through this lens, this is not how it should be. It should be
Mm.
chaos with screw ups all over the place, because that's what we see exemplified in the Bible. Anyway, you guys get me rolling. I'm just like, I can't stop
You,
riffing, man.
well, you touched on this earlier, though. We have, and I'm reading Todd Wilson, his book, How We Got There, or How We Got Here. And it's basically the church growth movement and all those things, George McGavern, the whole thing. And he's not opposed to it, actually. He doesn't write about it in a negative sense, but he's talking about the unintended consequences of some of the things that happened and how we've institutionalized evangelism, right? So we just want, if our people would invite people, then the program will get them saved.
Yes.
And all of a sudden there's no person who's
Yeah.
sharing the gospel. It's a program,
Mhm.
it's an institution.
It's
And
why,
that's consumerism.
yeah. It's why text in church is a bad idea. Do not use text in church for your first timers. That's not good.
Right.
We want
That's-
them to be in a relationship as quickly as they can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Well,
it's
and when you,
efficient, right?
It's
That's what we
Exactly.
like
It's
because we can
controlled.
control
and
that.
scalable.
I can be responsible. These are all good things you try to be as a good executive pastor or elder.
Well, and I remember, we're all about the same age. I remember I went to Cincinnati Bible Seminary. My master's is from there. Let it rest in peace. But I remember the people, the traditionalist, conservative, whatever you want to call them, saying, "Oh, you're just letting business and practices into church, and the whole marketing and all this." And I remember thinking, "Oh, come on, we got to do stuff, whatever." But looking back, I'm kind of like, they weren't all wrong. Like
Mhm.
some of those practices that we have introduced to the church in order to make it efficient and scalable and all that stuff, we've actually, I mean, in some ways, we have bastardized the whole Great Commission and made it more, I've joked about this before, Rob, the practical, the functional Great Commission that we've been living by, right, is go into all the world and make worship attenders, baptizing them into small groups, and then teaching them to serve once a month. Like that's really what
Yeah.
we've done. But
We've pillaged the soul out of the church.
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
And
And
we've taken away the one tool Jesus exemplified the most from the believer in relational evangelism. I am at a point now, and I want to hear what you guys think. Rob, I really want to hear what you think leading the church right now, man. When we don't challenge our congregations to relational evangelism, their heart actually can't transform to die to self.
Mm.
Because if I'm saved initially by Jesus for myself, that I'm a better person and I do better things in life, and I check all those boxes, but I'm not active in a relational evangelism, am I really able? Is that Jesus' equation? Like, what do you think about that kind of statement? Like,
Yeah.
can you
Yeah.
truly
Yeah.
transform a believer's heart if they're not active in relational evangelism?
I mean, I don't know the honest answer to your question, but what I would say as you say that, I think there's so many hurdles anyway, to people actually having those types of conversations and engaging in that. Some people are like, well, I'm not trained enough. Like I don't know all the right words to say. I may have built a great relationship. I may have a lot of trust, but how do I really, take that step? And so what they end up doing is they default to, us paid professionals who, have been to the seminars and taken the classes and have lots of practice, which really, I always joke around like the two times in my life where I was perhaps the most effective. Now, I lead way more people to the Lord nowadays, but it's because I have a larger church. And so, I have a lot of opportunities to let the machine do what the machine does. But man, personally speaking, I was most effective right after I was saved when I had
Yep.
no idea what to do, but I
Yep.
was so fired up that God was changing my life and I wanted to tell my friends about it. That
Amen.
was like,
Before we
that was a
forget.
yes. It was just a huge thing. And so when people are like, well, if I just was trained or I just knew, and it's like, no, 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 no. Like, just tell your story. Just say what people are doing. And so then what ends up happening is because, stuff gets outsourced to us professionals, we are the ones whose hearts continue to be transformed and we're fired up and we like so desperately want our people to do it, but because we are willing to sort of step in and be that piece, they never get to experience just like that transformative like joy and whatever, and so then they continue to resist it. So I would say at the very least it makes it very, very difficult for their hearts to be changed if they don't like in faith risk some of these conversations and let God use them in this way.
Yeah. Yeah. Jason, you have thoughts, man?
I have lots of thoughts. A few of them are even appropriate. I would say, so Doug, let me ask you this in response to that. Like, intentional churches, what do you guys provide a church, or how do you help a church equip everyone in the church to be able to identify their one and actually invest in that way?
Yeah, well, our deal was if you get this active in your church, again, no matter the size, no matter the size of town. We had a church in Minnesota, the one I was referring to earlier, that was about 110 people in average weekend attendance. New leader came, 60 something years old, legally blind, deaf, wears hearing aids. He was at the conference with his team. Came up to me, prayed for me several times. Tom Cobb, he's awesome. You want to guess how many people they had this last Easter? 650. And he said, last year we baptized 24 people. And it's the most we've ever baptized in a year in our church. And we've already baptized 35 this year in May. I'm like, if it works in Kimball, Minnesota, you don't need a lot of money and fanfare and programs to be it. So what we realized that if you do this and you even get a small portion of your church mobilized, that your church will grow. And when it grows is when you will start we believe the fast growing churches are actually the ones in a more danger than a revitalization, because the growth, we're assuming we know the root, and we start to make decisions as we get resources and money that we should never make, that are actually unintended consequence pulling
Mm,
away the mission from our congregation. For instance,
yeah.
we have staffing ratios. You can overhire, and I've seen it again and again once you give money, and now you're taking away
Mm,
subconsciously, so all that to say, in order for this to carry on for generations and not have this conversation ever again about a life cycle of a church, because I don't think that should be in the mix, you gotta have a system, and we call it the radical alignment system, and think about it as a toolbox. A radical alignment to personal ownership of the Great Commission. And the toolbox has 3 subsets. The one team, we use the Luke 15 thing a lot, which keeps the staff, all the staff and leadership stuff organized to the ends of personal ownership of the Great Commission, mobilizing and activating everyone. And inside of that, we have a lot of training around what we call the activator. It's the internal champion and executive pastor training. And the reason why is even in a small church, we identify a volunteer leader to do that is because they have most of the control over the budgets, the calendars, and the meetings, which is where you slide back into institutional thinking.
mm,
So the one team piece, that's what we've been doing forever. We just launched the one church section of the toolbox, which will have more things in it, but it has the one more initiative. And think about the one more initiative as a 10-month campaign, similar to a generosity initiative or capital campaign, where in those concentric circles of staff, board, and eventually congregation, we inspire and mobilize and train and equip the heart, mind, and strength of every believer in your church in that year campaign, and have then a standing set of trainings ongoing to pull people back to some of these base fundamental things like you guys are talking about. How do I share my testimony? How do I become a great question asker? So that's the one church and the one more initiative. And the final piece is we're piloting right now the one board. How does a board govern a church so that it doesn't take away Great Commission ownership from its people? So that is, in essence, what Intentional Church has provided and what we're building. And we're doing it in a pretty unique way in that we have what we call partner churches. So we're decentralizing some right now where church leaders on the ground in regions are owning more and more of this collaboration at the ground and not making it so it all has to come back to headquarters of IC. So and that's why it's 5,000 is actually a doable number, 5,000 churches at this point.
Yeah, that's awesome. Doug, I have like 20 questions I want to ask, and we're like basically out of time now. But so you're gonna have to have you back, first of all. But I think maybe the one question that I'd have is maybe someone's listening and maybe someone's like me, and this is like I'm being honest right now. As we're having this conversation, I love everything that you guys are doing. I love everything that you've said. I'm like, man, like if everybody in my church could take responsibility, for the Great Commission, it would be a game changer in really pouring gas on everything that we believe God has called us to accomplish in our region. And so, like, I'm sitting here going, what does it look like for New Hope to become part of the Intentional Churches Network? So, what does that look like? Someone's listening, they're like, man, I think I might want to be a part of this. Like, what does that process look like?
Well, the starting point for everybody, this book that we released, the Radical Alignment book, it's a short book. It's built for teams. So at the end of each chapter is a lot of questions for your team. And it's a lot of scripture. It's a prequel to our original book that really goes back to the why, this personal ownership, and builds the framework of how do you build a church like this. And you have to take the long haul view. This intentional churches, if you're new to us, go read this book, test the waters. We have easy, simple baby steps you can take. But the churches who've been in for a long time, like Exponentials at First Baptist Orlando, they're 9 years into this and they are pioneering a lot of the stuff that's showing back up in the radical alignment system because they took the long view. They didn't take the silver bullet chasing church leader view. They said, no, we're going to commit to this and we're actually going to contribute and help shape the future of what this network is. So the easiest step, Rob, is that book with your team and a team study or board study. And then for you, we're doing with our partner churches more and more in person, what we call alignment workshops. It's a 6-hour team based workshop. I'm coming in August to Zanesville, Ohio, to one of our partner churches to do one. So bring your team, man.
Nice.
And those are being stood up all over the nation right now.
Awesome. That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm in. We'll come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome,
Yeah.
man.
We'll make it happen. And I was going to say, Rob, Doug and I were talking about me coming to that too. So, yeah, let's make it
Well, then
happen
I'm
in
not coming.
Zanesville. Okay. Then I'll let you go. I'll stay home. Your team needs it. Man, Doug, we're definitely going to have you and maybe even Bart, both of you on again soon, because this is just great stuff. The churches that Rob and I interact with are struggling with this exact issue. They
Uh-huh.
are excited and ready to really empower, develop and deploy, all the stuff, the people of their churches. So I know they're ready and they want this. And what you guys are doing is really just handing them some tools and making this like real, right? In the way they do.
Yep.
And so, man, I appreciate you guys. I know it's been a 15-year journey for you guys, really, of evolving and growing. And man, I just really appreciate the effort and the work that you guys have put into that.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you guys for having me on too. Yeah.
of course. No, we're excited. And obviously show notes will have websites and all that stuff. But if you're in Central Ohio, and you'll see on the website the Zanesville meeting, the alignment workshop, and hey, we'll come hang out, and maybe we can get the Church Talk project involved and connect these two amazing organizations, and maybe even get more stuff done. You just never know. Or maybe we just play golf and don't do a thing. No, I'm
And
just
talk
kidding.
hockey.
and talk hockey. Yeah. No, 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 no. Well, to all our listeners, man, we appreciate you. We love you. We are so excited to share in life with you. I hope you have an amazing week, and please reach out. If you would like a copy of the book that Doug was talking about, you can either go to their website, call me. I will help you. I will get you hooked up. You can email us, Jason at Church Talk Project, Rob at churchtalkproject.com. I've read the book. It is worth every page. It's not a hard read, and it will get you going in the right direction. Have an amazing week, and thanks for being part of the Church Talk podcast. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us today at the Church Talk podcast. We hope the conversation encouraged and challenged you. We would love to hear from you. Email your questions or comments to jason at churchtalkproject.com. The Church Talk podcast with Rob and Jason is brought to you by the Church Talk Project. We work to engage, equip, and encourage pastors and church leaders around the world. Thanks for listening.